Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's HDI webinar, The Impact of Cybersecurity on IT Response Teams, a Game Changer. Today's webinar is brought to you by Everbridge, and there is a link to Everbridge's website right in the Attachments tab on your BrightTalk window. HDI is where service management and support professionals belong. And you can connect with us on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and in our members-only community, HDI Connect. And now we have a new podcast, Spotcast, on SoundCloud, and there's a link to the podcast right in your Attachments tab. And we have 5 episodes there so you can listen to about service management and organizational change management and problem management. And so go explore the podcast. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties today, please refresh your browser. It is absolutely the best thing you can do. And you can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the webcast, and they'll be answered during the Q&A session toward the end of the webcast. You can download the slides from today's presentation in the Attachments tab on your BrightTalk screen, and be sure to check out the links you'll find there. There will be audience polls today, and you can respond in the Vote tab by the presentation window. So make yourself familiar with where that is if you want to jump in and answer the polls today. Today's webinar will be available on demand almost immediately after the completion of this live webcast, and you'll receive an email reminder later on that it is available to you. The slides will advance automatically for you throughout the event. With me today is Vincent Jeffrey, Senior Director of Product Marketing with a focus on IT service alerting at Everbridge. IT team collaboration and process orchestration is also one of his specialties. He has over 15 years of experience in the IT operations and service management space with expertise in critical communications, IT service alerting, and IT process, runbook, and workload automation. He holds an MS in Mechanical Engineering and Computer Science, 2 certificates from MIT Sloan School of Management, and has international experience having worked in both Europe and North America. Welcome today, Vincent. Always a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you, Roy. Thanks for having me.
So we'll start off by talking a little bit about how cybersecurity and support are tied together, and we'll have a poll right off the bat here. We want to get kind of a baseline, and I'm going to launch a poll, and it's asking, does your service desk currently play a strong role in your organization's cybersecurity? So I'm going to put that poll out to you. Go to the Vote tab on your screen, and let's see what your answers look like. Does your service desk currently play a strong role in your organization's cybersecurity? And we're going to keep that open for a total of about a minute. Again, that's in the Vote tab. First selection, yes, our service desk has a defined and documented role. Second choice, not really. Our service desk helps users identify phishing and some other attack vectors case by case, but does not have a formal role. And third choice, no, our service desk has no defined role in cybersecurity. Interesting results so far, and we'll keep it open for about another 15 seconds or so, and then we'll look at the responses. Okay, coming right up, and we're going to close the voting and look at the results. So, here's what you said. 68% of you, by overwhelming group, says not really. Our service desk helps identify phishing on a case-by-case basis. Actually, the final score there was 62%, so about 2/3. 25% of you said that your service desk does have a defined and documented role. That's great. 7% of you said no, and 3% of you said I don't know, which is probably means that you don't have a defined role if you're not aware of one. So about 2/3 of you say not really. Our service desk helps on a case-by-case basis, but you don't have a defined role. Interesting. Okay, not unexpected. That's why we're here today. And so we're going to talk about how, when, and why the support center should be responding. But first, let's discover why this is such an important issue. Cybersecurity is huge and has been growing. There were some estimates back in 2014 that this was about a $400 billion a year problem. It is now a $600 billion a year problem. That is absolutely immense. That's cost and loss to business because of cybersecurity issues. So that's just absolutely huge cost, and is adding costs that you don't even think about, because a lot of organizations have been out buying cybersecurity insurance to get themselves covered in the event of loss. So let's talk a little bit about how this happens. And Vincent has a very interesting stat for you on the first bullet point here, phishing. So I look forward to seeing that. Some different flavors of attack vectors, right? Phishing is a huge one. Ransomware, as we know, over the past year or two, there's a huge attack of ransomware, WannaCry, and a lot of different types of ransomware, especially aimed at businesses like healthcare, because there's so much personal information up for grabs there. Other malware ongoing, as we know, that's been around for a long time. It's not slowing down. In fact, it's increasing. The creation of Internet of Things bots and everything else that's going on in the world of malware. And of course, social engineering, and this is where the service desk is particularly vulnerable. Service desk people are trained to be helpful. And a story I tell is somebody that walks up to a door behind somebody from the service desk, and they have a stack of 4 pizza boxes. The service desk person, being helpful, holds open the door. In goes the person with the pizza boxes, except instead of pizza inside the boxes, there's all kind of surveillance equipment. So they go through, they pick up on wireless signals, they take pictures of people's screens, whatever. They walk through the IT area and back out the other side, having gathered all kinds of information. That's just one example. Another kind might be somebody calling up to get their password reset on the phone. Without good authentication methods, this is definitely a problem. So there needs to be some attention paid to this type of social engineering at the service desk, because you're the interface with people, right? So let's talk a little bit about how you're getting trained or not. So this is a great quote. I really like this from Emily Stanham. Support staff is relatively low on the totem pole. We all know that. But has very high privilege in the systems that they're maintaining. And so you're a perfect target for people who want to attack your systems, right? Low in the hierarchy, easily accessible, but with a lot of access to the systems that you monitor, control, and take care of. And here's the types of things that we have to be on the lookout for. Current and persistent threats. Persistent threats are a huge concern for people in the CIO or director spots, right? We know that. Symptoms that malware or other attacks produce, and proper steps to take when malware is suspected. So let's look at a poll again, and think about some of the things we talked about, phishing and other types of security attacks. And let's look at what you are supposed to do when something like that happens. So I'm going to launch the poll. The question is, if and when there's a cybersecurity incident or attack on your organization, who is primarily responsible for communication with the business stakeholders? So let's say you've got a ransomware attack. Who is the person or persons or group that does the communication, is responsible for the communication with the business stakeholders, because they're primarily affected, right? So if and when there's a cybersecurity incident, who's responsible for communication? First choice, our information security office handles everything. Second one, like any other major incident response, the service desk is primarily responsible for communication. Third choice, service desk may play a role, but it isn't defined. And the fourth choice, I don't know, which means you probably don't have a defined response. Okay? We'll leave that open for a little bit, and then we'll chat about this a little bit. And because this is really central to the topic we're discussing today. Who is the person or group responsible for the communications when something bad happens? All right, I'm going to stop the voting. Let's look at the results here a little bit. And more than half of you said that our information security office handles everything related to cybersecurity, 52%. And then about 33% of you, so a third, said like any other major incident response, a service desk is primarily responsible. Okay? And then about 9% of you said service desk may play a role, but it isn't defined. None of you said, I don't know. That's good. You should know something about this. So is that, Vincent, let me ask you this question. And you and I have talked about this a little bit. Our information security office handles everything related to cybersecurity, and 57% was the final number there in that poll. And you and I have talked about how sometimes the security folks can become a black hole or a separate silo, and there's not a lot of communication between the cybersecurity folks and the rest of the organization. I think that's probably something you've seen in your work, true?
Yeah, that's right. I was reviewing the numbers as you were speaking, and what's very interesting here is the question was about who's responsible for communication, right? Not for looking for the root cause. And it's very interesting to me to see that 60%, almost 60%, rely on the InfoSec team for communication to the stakeholders. And so I find these very interesting. And the second one is a third says, hey, but a cybersecurity or a information security incident is no different from a major incident. And guess what? We are going to follow the same process. And service desk here is responsible for communication. So we don't have time to ask more questions to the audience, but I would be very interested in understanding where did you draw the line between a information security major incident and a regular major incident? Because what can happen here, and I'll talk about this in my part of the presentation, is that you can very well see how different teams are going to respond to what for one team they see as a cyber incident, and the other team will see a major incident. So I think this can create a lot of confusion, a lot of misunderstanding, and a lot of different communication and messages sent to the different stakeholders.
And thank you. And I think that one of the things that that is important here is making sure that people have an understanding of the differences and a real understanding of at least a little bit of what cybersecurity is about. And on this slide that's up on the screen now, the proper steps to take when malware is suspected or another type of cybersecurity attack is suspected. And as I said in a blog post on Think HCI and under Support World, the first line of assistance should also be the first line of defense. Right? Service desk, support center, however you call it in your organization, is the part of the organization that's closest to the customers, understands what they do every day, sees the problems that they run into, and has day-to-day dealings. They develop trust with the customers and end users, hopefully. And so therefore, when somebody sees a computer acting in a way they don't expect or gets an email they have a question about, they're probably going to look to the service desk support center to sort it out for them and tell them what they should do or should not do, which is often as important as what to do. You certainly don't want folks out there in your organization doing things like forwarding phishing emails to friends and asking the question. You want to know about that at the service desk for sure. So consider that. And here's a troubling set of numbers, and this is from our research that we do annually in the 2018 edition. Tells us that security training, security and policy training, both, we asked the question about them, who gets it, and this is the answer. So just about a quarter of the organizations, analysts, technicians, team leads and supervisors, managers, and directors, any of them get formal training in security policies, and that's pretty scary stuff. When you think about the fact that it's a $600 billion problem, as we said at the beginning. And it would seem to me and to an awful lot of folks who pay attention to this stuff that people at the front line and in the support organization in general, right up to director, should at least have a good understanding of what's out there and what is to be done or not done about it. So it's a troubling aspect of our organizations at this point. Security seems to be developing into a kind of a silo. So nobody is suggesting here that support analysts are going to be the cybersecurity experts for the organization. That's really not the point. But support analysts can play a critical role in detecting threats, because they're the ones that monitor things like endpoint security software. They can safeguard passwords and accounts, as I mentioned, somebody calling the service desk to get their password changed or to get access to a building because I left my card at home, that type of social engineering. Maintain audit trails by documenting all interactions. So if you get that call that says I left my card at home, that call should be documented, even if you don't do anything about it. And because that person may call security, they may call facilities, they may call the service desk, they may call a whole bunch of other people trying to get somebody to open the door. It's like the old tactic of walking up to those apartment buildings that have a buzzer to get into somebody, to get into the building so that you can go visit somebody, and just pushing every single button. Sooner or later, somebody will open the door. And so everything should be documented so that there is an audit trail. Be the line of communication between users and customers in the organization's security office, and that we're going to really talk about that, and certainly with the business stakeholders as well. Be the distributors of authoritative information to end users and customers. So oftentimes, if there's an incident of any kind, a major incident affecting the organization, the service desk is the one that will put a notice up on the organization's website, or will ask for PA system announcements to be made, or will get a distribution of information out there somehow. And so we should serve an equal function in the case of a cybersecurity incident. So these are all elements that you might think would be included in a plan for your organization. And we're going to ask about that. So in this set of stats, and we said that you don't get training except in about a quarter of the organizations. And on the other hand, 42% of organizations identify compliance requirements as a motivating factor for new technology. So when you go out to buy a new ITSM system or ticketing system or communication system, certainly compliance and security are part of the mix, and a major part of the mix, right? 42% of organizations say that's really important. And a quarter of organizations cite security as a reason not to outsource operations. So decisions are being made based on security concerns. It's that important to the organization. And so I think what we're suggesting here today is that type of focus should continue into the support organization and the plans for detection, identification, and communication of cybersecurity threats. First stage of risk management, make sure everyone in the organization is involved. That's in AT&T's cybersecurity report, and it certainly makes sense to me. Everybody in the organization, from the end users on up, I don't know if in your organization there's basic training for things like detecting phishing attacks and things like that, but many organizations do. HDI's parent company does conduct that type of training. Once a year, you have to go through and make sure that you are aware of what phishing attacks are, what those emails look like, and there's a phishing address to alert the security teams and IT support that there's a problem. So everybody needs to be aware. And now here we get into the idea of planning and training together. So a RACI matrix tells us who is responsible, accountable, consultant, and informed, RACI. You're probably familiar with this for project plans. So if you get your security staff trained and have an executable plan and practice it, it's that old saw about backup and recovery, right? If you can't restore your information, then what good is your backup? It's the same type of thing here. If you don't practice this stuff, you don't know for sure that it's going to work or where your trouble spots are going to be. So it's, excuse me, very good to have drills when you have a plan in place. Make sure that that plan is going to work. And the support staff can serve as the conductor of communications, like an orchestra conductor. Make sure that the communications go out when they're needed, to whom they're needed, and make users aware of what to do and not to do, like, hey, don't send that phishing email to your friend. So, how, when, and why you should respond. I'm going to back up for just 1 second. There's just a little summary slide here. Just remember these points. I put it in red as opposed to black just so it stands out a little more. These are the points that you should certainly consider within your organization. And then as we transition to Vincent's part of the presentation, I'm going to launch the third question. So go to your vote tab and let us know how things are done in your organization. And the question is, does your organization currently have a documented plan for communication during a cybersecurity incident? Excuse me. And the answer is that we adapt our regular incident plan. As Vincent and I were discussing earlier, it's the same as an incident, but maybe not. We have a fully documented plan with defined responsibilities, so we do have a RACI set up for cybersecurity response. We have a standard phone tree and on-call roster, so somebody is depending on people's availability by regular phone call and a phone roster. We don't have a documented plan as one of the choices, and the last one is, of course, I don't know, which means that the information is not percolating around your organization well enough. So we're going to let that go for a little bit. And then we're going to stop the voting and look at the results. The results are still coming in. Thank you for voting. I appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the poll, and we'll look at the results, and sometimes they change a second after the results come in. So right now, about a quarter of you say you adapt your regular incident response plan. Okay. 42% of you say you have a fully documented plan with defined responsibilities, so that's a good thing. 4% of you said we have a standard phone tree and on-call roster, and 23% said we don't have a documented plan. So about a quarter of you don't have a documented plan. And I find those stats pretty interesting, Vincent. I think it's a good thing that over 40% do have a documented plan with defined responsibilities.
Yeah, so I was looking also at the numbers, and to start on a positive note, if we do the math, 42 and 23, that's 65% of the people say, yes, we have something, which means we know that we should have something in place. Now, what it is and how documented it is and how available it is, how up-to-date it is a different story. But it looks like that, and that's a good news, that people are aware that information security incidents are rising. They are going to be almost a daily concern moving forward, and that they want to have something in place so that when something happens, they know how to respond. There's a quote, I don't remember who started with this quote, which I really like because it really describes what the situation or the mindset should be when it comes to responding to cybersecurity incidents. And it's really, like you said in a different way, Roy, earlier, failing to prepare is really preparing to fail. And I'll get into more details. But before I get into the details of the processes and the communication and coordination needs, let me share a few other data points with you guys, since this is fairly new. I mean, we've talked about cybersecurity for a long, long time, but this is new that this is becoming a mainstream concern, where, as you can see here, 25% of companies say in a recent survey that they have experienced some kind of cyber attack. And I want to remind everyone here that it doesn't have to be a cyber attack directed at your data center, at your infrastructure. Think about it. If your company, if your IT is using third-party providers, should they be application providers, service providers, or infrastructure providers, then and hosted in the cloud, then if those providers get hit by a cyber attack, then your company can be impacted, right? So it doesn't have to be you, but any component that makes the application components that you are using, right? So this is why when IT leaders are asked about the top causes for IT service disruption, so basically for incidents and major incidents, this is new this year. This is very interesting. As you can see, in number two, comes up at number two, as number two is cybersecurity related incidents, which is new. Over the, I believe in the year before, in 2017, it was only number 3. So this is becoming a bigger concern every day. And just to go back to what Roy was mentioning before, in terms of trends, again, if you look at 2015, that's 3 years ago, it was a concern, but that was something that we would talk about, but we didn't really see evidence of those incidents on a daily basis. Now, today, this is a different story. So don't pay attention to the numbers, the number of billions in terms of cost, but what's more interesting, I think, is to look at the trend. And you see, this is not a linear trend. This is exponential, which means that we in IT need to be ready ASAP, because this is only going to accelerate. Another fact, a data point that I wanted to share with you is about the spear phishing emails that Roy talked about earlier. We all know that cyber attacks can start with a spear phishing email, but how many times do you think they actually do? What's the percent of cyber attacks which actually begin with a spear phishing email? So I'm not going to do a poll for this question. I'm just going to share with you the answer, but I'm just going to give you 1 or 2 seconds to think about it. And the answer is 91%. So which means 9 out of 10 cyber attacks start with a phishing email. Why? Because it's so inexpensive. It's very cheap to send an email, right? So this is a tactic that's being used by cyber criminals at a large scale. Again, the bad guys, they only need to be right once, while us in IT, defending and protecting the IT assets, we have to be right all the time, right? So again, that's another very interesting thing, and you cover it, Roy. It's to think about, when we think about cyber attacks, we always think about those movies we've all seen, right? And we all think that the cyber criminals are those experts, PhD, and so on and so forth. And don't get me wrong, they are. But see that the tactics that they use are pretty simple or pretty basic. You know, they just are going to try to get us to click on a link to download an attachment, and so on and so forth.
And I might add there, Vincent, too, that over the years, as we know, going back a few years, and to some extent now, these phishing emails were pretty evident. There were a lot of misspellings in them. The logos weren't right. The addresses were pretty transparent. But as time has gone on, these have gotten better and better and better and better and harder to identify. Sometimes it's very, very confusing to try to track down whether one of these particular, spear phishing emails is authentic or not. So it's gotten progressively harder.
You're right. That's totally right. Yes. So moving forward, let's get to what needs to happen when something like this happens, right? So, as you know, as we all know, when we are hit by a security incident, response must be orchestrated, but also fast, right? That's like I say here, a race against time. So let's make sure that we all agree on the definition of what incident response is. So I like this definition here as an organized approach to addressing and managing the aftermath of an IT service disruption. So in this case here, we're talking about a security breach or cyber attack that is going to impact a large number of your business users and your company, your revenue, the revenue of your company, your brand, and so on and so forth. And the goal here, the goal of incident response is really to handle the situation in a predictable way. So again, this is not just responding for the sake of responding to a critical issue. It is responding in a predictable, and I should add here, consistent way, so that it is going to minimize the damage to your infrastructure, but also to your IT teams, and therefore to your business. So what happens when organizations don't have any processes in place? And I'm happy to see from the poll that most of you guys have some kind of plan in place. But I mean, think about it. If there are no coordination and communication rules defined within the organization, so we have a major incident that occurs, and all of a sudden you see the stress level of the teams going to the roof, and you're going to start seeing people running in all directions, right? Asking different questions like, is it real? Are we really experiencing this information security incident, right? What system is impacted? How big is the contamination? What application? What service is at risk? Who's the service owner? Where is the service owner? Where is he? Where is she? What's the communication protocol with the shareholders, with the IT teams, with management that we should use? For most of us doing business in the US, in North America, in Europe, there are regulations. So what states, what federal regulations do we need to comply with should also be a question that's being asked at this moment. Which authority do we need to communicate with? As you may already know, if I look at the US only, there are 54 laws in the US to explain what has to be done under a cyber attack. In Europe, they just released the GDPR, which is a law and regulation which went into effect in last May, which the same way explain and list all the actions that organizations need to comply with in these situations. How do we communicate with the impacted business users? If customers' social security numbers, information, credit card numbers are out in the internet, how do we communicate with those business users? What information can we share? Again, this is a cyber attack. You may not want to send an email to the press or to the media saying that my company was under a cyber attack, right? So what information can we share? What information must we share? Are also questions that need to be asked. And very important, who needs to respond? Who's the response team? Who's available? Who should we contact? How do we contact those people? Is contacting or communicating with people via email safe? Is my communication network compromised? So on and so forth. If you remember the Sony Pictures hack, you may remember that both telephony system and emails were compromised. So no way they could use this for internal communication. So that's what I like to discuss now. If you look at the support teams and service support here at the center on this slide, with everything Roy and I just talked about, that can be, it can be a very depressing picture that we just painted, right? Or you can see it at a fantastic opportunity for service support to own the communication that can happen and the coordination that can happen during those major information security incidents, and that's what I want to talk about. If you look at the organization, what is the team at the center of all the stakeholders when something like this happens? So here it's a major incident, but it could very well be a cybersecurity incident or information security incident. Service desk is in touch with the business users, is communicating with the business users. But it's also the team which is going to log the incident and the major incident in the ticketing system, should you be using ServiceNow, Sherwell, or any type of ITSM platform, right? That's also the team that's going to assign an incident manager, and the team that's going to reach out to the different IT experts from the different departments to have a look at the issue, to make sense of the issue, to get to the root cause. At the same time, while IT is working on mitigating, the technical aspect of the issue, this is the team who should be responsible for communicating with senior management. And in the case of a data breach, senior management means the communication is going to even go broader than just the IT team or the service owners. You are going to have to involve your marketing team, your PR team, most likely the C-suite, the CEO, the CFO, the CMO will have to be informed of a cyber attack, especially if it leads to a customer data breach, right? So as you can see, there is a fantastic opportunity for support team to be at the center. I call it the hub, the communications hub, where all the information is collected and then dispatched and redistributed depending on who needs to know what. Okay, so that's the first. So the first communication liaison on my slide here is between the service desk and business users, and I'm just going to take a quick example here. There was a hack. I tried to find a relevant but also recent hack, and it was the British Airways. Not to pick on those guys, but this is what happened in September. So 2 months ago, British Airways customers' credit cards hacked in major data breach. That made the news. So there's nothing here confidential. Everything that I'm showing is available online. Around 400,000 customers had their credit card information stolen, but not only the credit card numbers and billing address and everything else, but also the security code. As you can, and as you know, this is the last defense, last line of defense when it comes to protecting credit cards. So really, really bad situation. And how did they handle the situation? How did they handle the communication? It was handled very poorly, right? So service desk here was communicating directly with the impacted business users who, as you can tell, they don't really know because it's a airline company, so their customers buy tickets, airline tickets through the website, and they're not employees in this case, but they still had to communicate. And by the way, communication to the impacted business users is a mandate as per GDPR, which is, like I said before, the European privacy law. So what you can see here in this screenshot is the communication between end users and the British Airways, and there are thousands of messages of customers saying, see here, you're giving us such conflicting advices. Sometimes the the information was so different from one agent to a different one that it didn't even make sense. In some cases, they were saying, you know, most of our, we know we had a data breach, we have no information on who's impacted, please contact your bank. So people wouldn't even know, have any information on what to do, how to do it, and so on and so forth. And sometimes they were saying, no, the company is going to reach out to you with more information. But people were saying, you know what, if my credit card numbers are out there on the internet, I want to, you know, I want to stop it and call my bank and cancel my credit card. So a very bad handling of the communication here from the support team to the impacted business users. And that's only one aspect of what support team should be doing in this situation, right? As you can see here, the service desk and the support team should be the communication hub for all the communication going to the service owners, to senior management, to the different authorities that they need to communicate with. And it's not only communicating once, saying, hey, we have an issue, but it's keeping everybody updated, right? So that's the second aspect of communication that needs to happen between senior management and the support teams. Now, as you can imagine, the IT team, the support team is not going to communicate the same type of information that they are sharing with the business users, and it's also going to be different type of information when shared with the IT teams. And as you can see here, like I said before, there are new regulations popping up everywhere in Europe, but also in North America and pretty much everywhere in the world, because this is becoming such a big issue that governments and authorities are you know, putting together some rules and governance around this. And this is just GDPR here, an extract of GDPR showing that any organization after a data breach have to communicate with the authorities about a lot of different things, like the impacted business users. So who were the impacted business users? What information was stolen? What containment plan did you put in place? So again, and that's pretty new. I was in a conference 3 days ago, and someone was saying, you know, back in the days when a bank got robbed, we would blame the bad guys, right? But now, if you think about it, today, when a company is experiencing a cyber attack and leading to a data breach, we're going to blame the organization, not the bad guys. So there's a shift in how authorities are looking at the problem. So next,
Ben, if I could jump in there for a second too, GDPR, of course, covers Europe and any organizations that do business with Europe or have employees in Europe, or you know, a lot of companies are subject to GDPR even here in the United States. What's interesting though, and as you mentioned earlier, there's like 54 different sets of regulations that are applicable in the United States. There's no one governing regulation or law as there is. California just passed some regulation that's similar to GDPR, but that is applicable to California. Obviously, they can't pass laws for New York, and so it can be an increasingly tangled web of information to get through too. So it's important for people to plan for this stuff.
You're totally right, and especially in the U.S., where you have 54 different laws, depending on where your company does business, in what state, you may be subject to reporting to different state agencies. So we don't have this unique federal authority today where you can report everything like we have in Europe, but this is coming in the U.S., and like you said, today it's already very complex to navigate through the different laws and regulations that your company is subject to and needs to comply with. Because guess what? What's new is if you don't comply, then you are subject to a financial penalty. But that may be the topic for another webinar, because there's a lot of things to say as well here. So moving on, let's look at the third interaction that the support team will have when this happens, and that's going to be with the IT teams. So as you can see here, making sure that we're going to reach out and engage the right IT experts so that they can quickly make the right decision about, to mitigate the cyber attack. So I'm not going to get into the details of what exactly you do, because it's going to depend on the flavor of the cyber attack and on how it's spreading, number of impacted users, and so on and so forth. What I'm going to talk about is about the process, right? So what does it take to quickly resolve an incident? So like you said in the poll before, a cyber security incident is no different from a major incident. We need first to know that we have an issue. We then need to do some triage and get all the responders on deck so that they're going to be able to respond to this particular issue. Identify the root cause. Do we need to patch a system? What is the cure for this one? Then we apply the fix, and then last but not least, we are going to ensure that it's now resolved, right? And that may take days, by the way. So this is basically the process. And what's interesting to see here is that the step that takes the most time in the process is the phase number 2, the time to respond. It's basically to get the right team to have a look at the issue so that they can make the right decision. And the right decision sometimes may be to unplug a website. So imagine the responsibilities of the people making the decision here. If it comes to like Equifax, if you remember the Equifax story, their website went down for a couple of days. They had to do that, right? You have to shut down some of application, and that can have a big repercussion on your business, right? So decision that is made during this time here is critical, and that's why you need to ensure that you have the right people engage ASAP with the right information. And at no surprise, you see that up to 70% of the time here of the entire time it takes to resolve an issue is spent on the time to respond. So I'm not going to get into all the details of what companies have put in place to get better at detecting cyber attacks, but they use what we call SIEM, Security Information Event Management tool. Usually they're coupled with your ITSM system that you see here, and but then what happens then is where companies usually need to get better at, and that's basically if I go back to the poll, it's getting a RACI in place, knowing who's going to do what, in what timeline things are going to be done, with what messages, what information, and so on and so forth. And also, this plan should also document the fact that all the people identified may not be available. They might be on PTO, on vacation, it might be a different time zone, they might be sleeping, and so on and so forth. So how do I escalate in this case, right? And these are the questions that the plan should answer. How do I engage? How do we engage your response team? Because it's going to be a different response team based on the type of incident, based on the severity of the incident. Who are they? Where are they? How do we engage? What communication protocol are we using with them? What information do they need? What if they don't respond? And so on and so forth. And so if we get into the details and of what's happening, what we see happening when we talk with the organization. So something happens, a cybersecurity incident happens, whether it's detected by the end users themselves or by the NOC, or like we said before, the SOC, the Security Operations Center, so basically the InfoSec team. Most likely it's going to get to the support team. We're going to create an incident. Incident manager is going to be assigned, and that's what's very interesting here. The incident manager is going to try to engage the response team. And what we see, and we don't have time this year to do a poll, but it'd be very interesting in knowing what you actually do at your organization. 83% of organizations are still using email to communicate with their IT teams when they are most needed, which has two issues here. First, what do you do if your email system has been compromised by the cyber attack, like the Sony Pictures hack? And two, how can we rely on emails to engage people in a timely manner? Because we know that emails is a one-way communication, right? So we don't know if people have even received the email or have taken any action, right? Because they may be in a meeting, they may be doing something on lunch break, they might be, like I said before, on vacation, on PTO, or even sleeping. And as we all know, emails don't wake up anybody in the middle of the night, right? So if you're going to do that, if you're going to have a plan, make sure that you're going to be using the right communication channels, right, to make sure that you reach out to the right people ASAP. So if email doesn't work, what do we do next? Incident management is going to call. So call trees. Where do I find the information? Who's on call, right? Find the number, call the people. It takes another 4 minutes per recipient or participant, right? Which will have to convince that they need to join the call. Let's say they didn't answer, or we're not able to reach them, or we had to leave a voicemail. So we still have 2 people to reach out, right? Because we can't start a mitigation call or restoration call without all people on board. So we're going to try a different number. And if people still don't engage with the support team, what's going to happen next? And I'm pretty sure that you go through this every day. You have to escalate to the manager, right? And the manager is going to, in turn, call a few members of his team or her team to get them to participate in this conference bridge that we just looked at. Once we've got all 5 people engaged, we can now send a GoToMeeting invitation, a WebEx invitation, so that everybody can now start sharing their ideas and go through the logs and go through the forensic information we've got from the network team and so on and so forth to start investigating the situation. But guess what? This very simple process here, trying to reach out to 5 people on the IT team, already took us 51 minutes. That's already 51 minutes while we haven't done anything and we haven't stopped anything. So the damage is growing. And at the same time, if business users have been impacted, like if you consider a DDoS attack, for instance, where the availability or the response time of the web application is going to suffer, it's most likely that now you're going to have hundreds, if not thousands of impacted business users calling into the service desk to report an issue, which means hundreds, if not thousands, of requests that you're going to have to handle within your service desk. So just sharing here a few data points on how quick, how fast IT organizations are able to engage the team. And you can see, this is a benchmark across more than 100 organizations, and it's all over the place, right? Only 22% of the organizations are saying that they can get everybody on a conference bridge within 30 minutes, while 3/4 of them say it's going to take us more than half an hour, right? And more than 50% say it takes even more than 1 hour. So this is just to help you see where you stand today. And what makes it even harder, and that's very interesting because that was your first answer to the answer to the first poll that we showed earlier, is things are even more complex than what I just showed you, right? If you consider DDoS attack, you said 57% of us have we have our InfoSec organization, and they're going to handle the communication and everything. Now, if it's a DDoS attack, yes, maybe they're going to pick up the DDoS attack and issue activate an incident response plan to reach out to the impacted business users and IT and service desk to let everybody know that we are under a cyber attack. But at the same time, if it's a DDoS attack, the web application availability and response time is going to suffer, and the NOC is going to pick it up, and we're going to see that the application performance monitoring and network monitoring are going to show some red flashing areas saying, yes, we have an issue with the application. So in turn, they're going to do the same thing. Oh, we have a major issue with the e-commerce application. Let's activate the incident response plan. At the same time, if business users are impacted, they are going to call into the service desk. So now you have 3 different threads of information going to the different response teams, the different support teams with different communication, with different messages. And like Gartner says, this is, oh, I'm going too fast here, this is what is going to be the biggest challenge for organization moving forward. And the biggest challenge is going to be the coordination between the different teams, the different departments, for when something like a information security incident occurs. So again, when you document the plan, when you put the plan together, think about the different departments. Who else is going to do something about this, right? Sometimes it's more than just, it's not only the support team, right? You have your InfoSec team, your NOC team, support team, and you want coordination. You don't want different processes going at the same time, or you can, just like the British Airways story, you're going to create confusion. Okay, so how can we expedite the incident resolution process? Use automation. The answer is really automation. So like we said before, have a documented plan, defined who does what, have a RACI ready. And then for when it happens, you don't waste time doing manual steps for communicating and reaching out to people. During a crisis, there's no time to write a message, to get it approved by your marketing or your PR agency. So everything should be done prior to this to happen, so that when something like this happens, it's just a matter of executing the plan, right? So automate most of those manual actions that don't even bring any value, and have your team dedicated on supporting the business and supporting the business users. So actions like stakeholder communication can be automated. Launching restoration calls can be automated. Engaging the response team, that can be an automated process. So you don't have to do anything. You have to call people. Escalation, that also can be a automated process. If people don't answer, bing, automatically it's going to go to the next person in line. It's called on-call schedule and shift management. And there are solutions out there to help you with this, and Everbridge is one of the providers helping organizations on a daily basis with their incident response process. So the idea here is, we all know that those situations are not only scary but stressful. So responding faster every time is what you should be trying to do. Again, like if you remember, the definition of incident response is to get to an approach that's going to be predictable and consistent, so that you're going to reach out only the people who are absolutely required. And like I said, automatic escalation, if no answer, so therefore there's no in-person confrontation. We don't call people anymore to convince them to participate. We are going to notify proactively the impacted business users. So they are going to unplug their computer from the corporate network, or they will not even get their laptop on the network. We're going to keep the stakeholders informed. That's our responsibility in support, right? We need to let them know what's going on. That way, this is going to reduce the number of calls we're going to receive in the service desk. If we tell people, yes, IT is aware of the issue, IT is working on it, we'll let you know when the issue is fixed. It's most likely that people are not going to open a ticket with us anymore. And get people to work on the issue ASAP. One click access to a conference call. No more, let me send you an email with GoToMeeting or WebEx information. Again, you might not even be able to use your emails because they might be compromised. And for regulation and compliance, make sure that you keep a copy of everything, including a recording of the entire conversation. And with this, I think we're just on time, Roy.
Thank you, Vincent. Yes, we're very tight on time at the end here. I don't think we're going to have time to answer questions, but there were a couple of questions, one on phishing. Train your users. Look, there's good material out there to let people know what a phishing email looks like, and as I mentioned earlier, it's tough to catch them these days. And the second one was, what are some important actions? Review the slide deck that Vincent just shared with you and look at that list of things to do at the end. It's a great list of things that you should be responsible for. So with that, we thank Vincent Jeffrey and our sponsor Everbridge for being with us today. We appreciate you all coming to the webinar. Remember, it's available on demand immediately. And this webcast is brought to you by United Business Media. It's copyright by UBM, and the presentation materials are owned by, or copyrighted if that's the case, by HDI, which is solely responsible for its content, and the individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and opinions. On behalf of HDI, thanks for your time and have a great day. We'll see you on our next webinar on December 11th. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.